Welcome to another episode of War Hero to Superhero. You know the place. We are in the Superhero Battle Room. We bring in our veterans and first responders that have transformed their lives from the prayer room to the boardroom. And we have John Renken. We've had him on our episodes when we used to be digital TV. That is how long that we have not seen him. So we're getting an update and sharing his story a little bit. He is a military man that served his country, and I accidentally spelled that wrong. That's lovely. And is now serving our community by bringing life back to you and your family. You'll figure out why when we bring him to the stage, and we'll have him in a moment. Hey, John, thanks for joining.
Hey, man, how are you?
Doing good, doing awesome. Had to get out of that extra coat. It was getting a little hot in here for this interview. Woo! So we're gonna go bring it back because people haven't seen you on. The last time I think you were on the show is when we were on digital TV. We were on Legrity when that existed. So your episode is not on our new show. So it's kind of like a reboot, rebrand in that particular regard. So we're going to hear your story a little again, but from a broader audience. So let's get into the first part. What inspired you to join the military many moons or many minutes ago?
Yeah, so for me, I've always wanted to be in the military. Ever since I was in third grade, I read a Norse mythology book about Thor, and I was like, man, I want to be a warrior. So I actually joined the Air Force first, and then because of a blood disorder, they wouldn't take me, but the Army did. So that's how I got into the Army. All my family has served. I mean, my dad didn't serve because of Vietnam, and he was colorblind. They wouldn't let him go, but all my uncles did, all my cousins did. So it's kind of a mix of something I saw when I was in third grade and family tradition.
That is the amazing thing on when the time you go over and join, if you can come in or not come in. I know most recently they're trying to restore people from the COVID shot. That was just a news story a couple of days ago. I know when people were getting the anthrax shot, people were getting kicked out and everything else. And then colorblind people couldn't come in back in the day. Now they allow 20 AFSCs from the military. So it's amazing how long you can stay in based on what the regulations is. So it's kind of providential that we came in at the right time. So how long were you in, and when did you leave?
Yeah, so I was in from 1993 to 96, very short stint. Then I spent 20 years training special forces in hand-to-hand combat.
Yeah, I remember when we used to talk about that all the time, like you literally were working with soldiers contractually, and you actually have some MMA experience, if I remember correctly, too. So you're able to do that. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah, so I was a pro fighter, fought in the early days of MMA, had 70 pro fights, 6 world titles, fought all over the world, 3 times in Japan, Venezuela, Canada, Mexico, Thailand, etc.
And that's really awesome. So because of those types of things, you had a lot of great experiences, but you had to make a transition for like when contracts go away, when you went over and got out of the service, also in life circumstances and everything else. So what made it from a transition to a transformation for you?
Well, so, I mean, I've had multiple transitions, right? So I served in the Army, then went to college, then became a pro fighter, then became a contractor and did contracting for 20 years. Then COVID happened. And because of COVID, the contract I was on kind of went away. It didn't go away. They just reduced it, and wasn't, with 4 kids, wasn't really feasible for me to keep after it. I think the biggest thing about transition is to love change, to know what your ultimate purpose is, right? So for me personally, I know what God put me here for. So every transition is just putting me in a position to ultimately fulfill the things that God has for me.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of transitions as we follow people, each other socially and when we connect in person. And if I'm getting it right, are you going to the Military Influencer Conference coming up?
Yeah, I'm looking at going. I'm trying to get down there.
That's really cool. Yeah, so down in Atlanta this year. If everybody's listening, go get your tickets now. They're 40% off. If you watch this episode after May 1st, it went up, but it's still going worth it. If you're brand new, recommend you go as a content creator to get your basic ticket in. If you're really trying to leverage it, get to the next level, get your VIP ticket. The cool thing is you can buy the add-ons depending on the season. So that's a nice little perk. So if you want to get your discount now, or at least to get your spot, get your ticket. So with that, What about this current transition? Because the last I knew of you, and when I look at your brand, I think years ago is tactical traveler. Even when I go and you up and everything else, and I know you're still doing that stuff, but you're now saying, at least in your title, CEO, Sales Platoon. What made you pivot to what you do today? And share a little bit about what that pivot is about.
Yeah, so 2020 COVID happened, right? If you can't be within 6 feet of each other, you can't fight. So in 2022, after quitting the contracting combatives gig, Fort Campbell called me and asked me if I would start a skill bridge, helping transitioning military get jobs in the civilian marketplace. And so that's Sales Platoon. We take guys, we train them, we help them get jobs that are going to pay them well above $25 an hour.
I'd say that's really huge. I know I'm making my military retirement journey right now, and there's only been a couple jobs that I've been offered over $25 an hour. And because of our current economy, I'm looking at reversing that decision and then just keep growing the business in that particular regard. So what would you do if a person like me that takes the skill sets that we've had, like mine is training and IT, and how do you go over and leverage that to make that above? But also, I've kind of been an employee for a while. So how would you help me maybe break that mentality so I can get past that point?
Yeah, so every W-2 on the planet, every single one of you, is overpaying on your federal taxes by a minimum of $8,000 a year. So the first thing I would tell all of you to do is to learn how to do sales. And one of the ways you could do that is by starting a side hustle. If you ever seen the movie Accountant, at the very beginning, Christian's like, did you make that necklace? And she's like, yes. And he's like, sell them. And she's like, on occasion. And he's like, ma'am, you may have what the IRS calls a home-based business. So I think everybody should have a 1099. I don't care if you're making wood things or, doing flags or whatever it is, right? Because that puts you in a 1099 and allows you to deduct before you're taxed. The second thing is that IT is a very good and very popular career field right now. Depending on where you live, you can start anywhere from 60 to 80 grand a year. So
then I must be in a really, 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 really poor environment, because I know for the jobs that I've looked over, they are typically less. They're more about 15 to about 28 that they're offering across the board. And I understand that in that particular regard. So I would probably have to migrate to maybe Maryland or DC. That's what I hear.
No. Like even in Tennessee, I've got a role in Nashville for IT starting at 85 grand.
Wow.
Yeah. You see, man, you just got to know where to look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been moving for years and everything else, at least for the places that I've found. On everything else, I'm kind of rusty, but it's just curious to go over and to understand, to break out that mindset and everything else, because that's huge. It's like no matter where you go. And that, I think the biggest lesson I think we're learning right now, as I'm asking questions about myself and others, is that we need to network, and we haven't networked in a while. So that's one of those things too. So speaking of overall networking, when you connect with people and you're growing, you've had all these transformations and everything else, there's tough times, there's pressure. Like, I know some of your pressures, we've talked and everything else. And what is that secret fuel that goes over when the pressure and the tough times come? Because you have gone through the ringer, at least in my personal opinion.
Yeah, I've been through some tough stuff. I mean, I think it goes back again to purpose, right? Whatever your purpose is what's going to give you the fuel to get through the crap that's going to come. It doesn't matter what you're doing, right? All of us have to deal with it. So I really think that boils down to clarity. Clarity of purpose for me is what's really been the thing that's helped me get through. I mean, you brought it up, and I'll just kind of explain a little bit. I went through a really hostile divorce. That's what he's referring to, where my ex-wife literally stated her goal was to basically make me beg for time to see for my kids. I ended up winning my kids in the divorce and had full custody. And, through that process, a lot of people lose themselves to drugs, sleeping around, doing stuff that's not normally who they are. So when I got served the papers that she was filing for divorce, one of the things I said to myself is I'm not going to lose myself in this process. And so I didn't turn to drugs or alcohol. I turned to my really close knit of friends. Network is more important than just making money. It's also what will keep you sane. And so I think between, knowing what my ultimate purpose in this life is because of who I believe in, again, that's just me personally, combined with the stuff that we've all gone through as veterans, right? And then just, understanding me personally. I think those are the things that gave me the fuel to make it through.
And I think that's huge. And I'm glad that you're being vulnerable and go over and share. I didn't want to go into your Kool-Aid unless you wanted to go in that. So thank you. Because a lot of us as veterans, unfortunately, go through divorce. It's not as high as everybody thinks it is, but sometimes ours is more prominent. It's preeminent. It's kind of more toxic and then once we have that network, sometimes we even use that network. I see that on the current pages at my base. People are like, I'm going through a divorce. What can I go over and do? Blah, blah, blah. And they'll do now the anonymous member, like on Facebook, and they'll be like, and you just see the positive information, but you see the negative information, you see the nastiness, but also you see that we have a lot more resources to it. So it kind of becomes a more like hit in the face in there. So definitely it's one of those things that, it's just one of those things that hurts my heart, but I'm glad that you're able to make it through and then have the custody and everything else. And that you've not just allowed the trials to go over and destroy you, allowing it to be a testimony.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
So speaking of things of tactics, let's imagine yourself, it could be years back. It could be when you first came into service. Again, you've made multiple pivots to transformation. If you ever had to visit your past self, or let's say you're coaching somebody in the sales platoon, what 3 tactics would you go over and give them to get from just surviving to thriving?
So I think if we're going to talk about going from just surviving to thriving, you have to back up. You have to understand your purpose. And what I would say is, I don't care if you've got 2 years left, 20 years left, whatever it is. We teach this in the Army, but we don't teach it for our career transition, whether that's post-service or while we're in, is what's the end state, right? Because I can't get to New York City without a map, right? So I got to know where I want to be when this is all said and done. So just, play the game with me. By what age do you want to retire, and how much do you need to retire with to live the lifestyle you want? Now backtrack that. So we know that you're going to minimum serve 2 years, maximum, 20 to 30 years or whatever it is. So what do you want life to look like after your term of service, whether that's 2 or 20? And most people don't actually take the time to think through where they're going and only think about the now. So the greatest way to have impact is to understand your purpose and then to actually prepare for transition by asking yourself the question, where do I want to be in years?
I think that's huge in that particular regard, because I would say that's one of those things that I didn't plan for my first separation. When I got at 12 years, I was just trying to figure out, grow business, that type of thing. But I didn't plan for anything else other than the here and now. And then I put myself in a world of hurt with, like, my family almost went homeless a couple times. We had 4 suicide attempts within a 10-year span. The homelessness was like 4 separate times through several different moves, 70 different career paths. If I could have just had somebody like, hey, when I was looking at when they first brought me back home and saying the reality of, like, hey, we're trying to keep you in, but what happens if you don't?
Yep.
And everything was planned on my own. I didn't have a post or pre John Renken slapping my face or kicking me somewhere to go over and tell me those things. So I think that's huge, that we need to look at where we want to be and then have that purpose. Because I had purpose in Christ, but I didn't know my specific purpose yet. And it's kind of funny, sometimes even the purpose cultivates, because as I've seen your journey, I thought always tactical traveler. And then when you were doing the stuff, and every time you switched a role, you were fully center, like present in that role. And that's, everybody knew who you were. And I didn't know that you were strategically, everything was jumping in that particular
all
regard.
building.
Yeah.
So here's what's really, I'm glad you noticed that. So here's what's really important about that particular part. So you got to be fully sold out on whatever it is you're doing, which is what I do every time. If I'm not sold out on it, I won't do it. Right? Just me personally. But what I also do is, as for each one of those independent things that I've done over the course of my career, I collect a network of influencers inside that sphere. Right? So when I was teaching combatives, you go to my Facebook today, I have lifelong friends that helped me build the United States Army Combatives Program. Matt Larson, the founder, is a great man, a great mentor. Like anytime you follow him, he's just spewing wisdom, right? And so every time I've made this transition, I try to surround myself with people that are experts and are at the top of their game. And then those contacts go with you, right? So maybe Matt can help me with Sales Platoon, right? I don't know, maybe not, but it doesn't matter because his network probably can. So I'm always building towards that next foundational block.
That's interesting. I'd like to visit that just a little bit. I know this is not normal for the questions, but I want to visit this a little bit. So for me right now, I'm a group training manager and everything else. The long-term goal is speaking, teaching, content creation, what I do here. This is where I get my bread and my butter. This is where God comes alive in me. It's like Christ in Daniel Faust, just like you, Christ in John Renken. But how do you stay present where you're at now, that's providing the bread and butter, giving that people that 110%, I think that's BS, but that's what I've been told recently. But how do you get to that next goal while giving that? Because there's only so much time. I'm not quiet quitting. I'm not saying I've done that, but I'm saying, like, how do you go over and do that? Well, how do you give that mentality of that they would not know the difference? Because at least from me observing you throughout the years, I never knew when you pivoted until you pivoted. Even though we've talked, we've had conversation and everything else, you usually told me when the pivot was happening. You're like, hey, the contract went. I'm like, are you serious? And you're like, it was 20 years. And you're like, it's gone. And then you made the pivot. And then when I talked to you a few years later about Tactical Traveler, you got to a point like, okay, it's COVID, nobody's buying, everything else. And that's why you pivoted. So how did you keep that presence both sides? Do you have like a small crew that knows your dreams and you just give the mask in a sense, or how do you go over and do that? I was always curious about that.
Yeah, so I think it's passion, right? So travel is a part of my DNA. So even though COVID was dead, I kept that group alive and just, I didn't do as much, I would just post periodically just to keep the engagement, right? But there was no trips or nothing happening because COVID decimated the travel industry, right? But that's always what I love. And that's what I want to do, right? So, however, there's a greater purpose in that, and Tactical Traveler happens to be a part of that, which is I just love our community. I just love helping veterans. Like my entire adult life has been nothing but veterans. Serving at Fifth Group for 20 years, and the men that I got to work with were just such, quality guys. And, I know that there's always the turd that gave us all a bad name, right? So I'm not saying those guys don't exist, but by and large, the veteran community is just a superb community. That's who I want to work with, right? So Tactical Traveler, I don't work with civilians. I just help military travel, right? Mm-hmm. So you become so passionate about your tribe. Now there's another piece to this, which is legitimately two things: understanding that balance is false in individual moments, but it's absolutely necessary in seasons. So a lot of my friends think that I'm nuts because they don't see my regularly scheduled downtimes, right? They see me doing a 15-hour day, because there's days, because I work for myself, where I'm in the office at 5 a.m. and I'm there till 8. But then there's times when I'm off, like just as an example, I'm taking my daughter, who just got a full ride to Providence University. I'm taking a week off to drive her out to college and move all of her stuff out there, right? So in seasons, there is balance because you have to have it. But in the moments, there is no such thing as work-life balance. So some days I work like a maniac and some days I don't work.
I think that's huge in that particular regard. And I think that's what the corporate structure has wrong. That's another reason why my long-term goal is to leave at least the reserve and everything else, is because there's moments of this senility. And then if you have something that's always punching like this, you would burn out, because that's, I think, the hard part. And I think we're going to see burnout of our next generation as of all the slices are coming in. Even my son's going in 3 to 6 months. And I hope that it doesn't. But that's the thing I think that you have really gave to our soldiers right now. I think that was a golden nugget, in a sense that you can have that laser focus intensity, but you also have that laser focus intensity and you shift it. So you're shifting from, okay, I'm in the field and I'm doing Sales Platoon and everything else, but then I'm grinding out to then drop my daughter off and go and do that. Providence is it Providence, Rhode Island? Is that where she's going?
Providence, Montana. So it's a 27-hour drive for me.
Yeah, that's the one thing I hope I can retire out of, is driving. If I could never drive again, I would.
Yeah, but again, that goes back to my primary purpose, man. Everything I do is really about trying to get my kids further ahead than I was, right? And, so if you really had to boil my life down to 3 themes, it's, for me, God. And I try as best as possible to be a good example. I blow it. So for all you that hate hypocrites, I'm sure you can find something in my life. But I genuinely try to do the right things and be a good representative. So that's the first. My second is my kids, and my third is the veteran community. And everything I do, I try to wrap into those 3 things.
And I think that's huge. I think that's a good balance. And that's what War Hero to Superhero does and everything else. We come from the prayer room to the boardroom, because you got to have that. We leave this life and we don't carry the rest. The relationships are only going to go over and carry. And if they don't have the same relationships with God and they choose other things, then we don't get to carry those with us. So all the rest of the stuff doesn't carry. You can make $1 billion. And I remember with a joke back in the day, like the guy wanted to be buried with his money. Well, they put a check in there and then they put void and then they threw it in his casket. He got to be buried with his money, but he didn't carry it. And there's trillions of dollars being transferred right now with the boomer generation, either in businesses and other things. And the biggest thing is that we need to be carrying the legacy of people and souls first in that particular garden. I've always seen you do that. I mean, we all can be hypocritical, and everybody can judge me too eventually later on too. It's just like there's going to be tons of things. You go read my books. Just my writing alone is hypocritical. I can speak great on the stage, and when I write a book, it's and, or, and I have like a 12-paragraph run-on sentence. I've been learning. I've been learning a lot. So that's a good thing too. So I totally get that. And John, I want to thank you for going over and joining on the show, going over and sharing your wisdom and everything else. We're going to give you the floor one more time if you want to talk more about Sales Platoon or Tactical Traveler or anything else, and then we'll close it out.
Yeah, I'm not going to take a ton of you guys' time. So first, Daniel, thanks for having me on again. I love what you do, and I follow you pretty regularly, and I hope that your people get a lot out of this. So 2 things, guys. Tactical Travelers, my group. It's where I show you how you can go to Atlantis as a veteran for just $500, or you can get a free 10-day cruise. Those things are free to us as a community. You have to pay for the Atlantis stay, but to get the qualification, you just have to prove military status. If you are transitioning out of the military in the next 12 months, connect with me. My Sales Platoon will help you get a job that pays you a minimum of $30 an hour.